All right. So today I'm here with Rick Alexander. Rick is an all-around badass. He's had a lot of very interesting things go on in his life. Currently, he's well known for being a crazy ultra marathoner. He just finished up a 1,036-mile bike solo run. And Rick also runs his Clarity Academy, which helps people achieve their performance not only physically but in the kind of mental, emotional world as well. So, welcome to Rick.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to do this.
Oh, excited to get you. We'll get back on the air with you. Last time I talked to you was, I think, actually when we recorded your podcast. So it's great
Yeah,
to be
and for
back.
totally, yeah, same. And for the listeners, like you've been instrumental in changing my life too. So let the record show. Like I feel like I learn from you every time we're together. So I'm excited to do this.
That's awesome. That goes both ways too. And honestly, check out Rick's podcast, Morning Coffee with Rick Alexander. I said it right this time. You just
You did.
changed it last time we talked, and I said the old name.
That's right.
Uh, but Rick's podcast is awesome. It just gives little tidbits almost every morning about different perspectives and things to think about to really put your life trajectory where you want it to be. I love it. I love listening to it. It's very exciting to have you here. First thing, Rick, I am going to probably ask you about is the most recent thing, the bike run.
Mm.
Can you tell me a little bit about that one?
Yeah, for sure. So I've actually had it on my list, not on my list, but sort of my bucket list to do a self-supported solo adventure. Because as you mentioned, I'm big in the ultra marathon world. I didn't race a lot this year because I had a hip injury that I was sort of fighting with throughout the summer. But for the most part, the year before I ran 8 or 9 ultras, including a 250-mile run in body armor. I usually do something over 200 miles. And so what was interesting is I realized in those races how much I relied on the aid stations and the crew. So people that aren't familiar with that world. So ultra marathons, anything over a marathon. So for me, I like the 50-mile distance and up to like 250 miles is my longest, 247. And throughout it, you typically have a crew and they keep your body going and they help you mentally. It's like, and I realized in all of those races how badly I was like sort of relying on the crew every single time to get me through and relying on the aid stations. And I kind of wanted to pull that from myself, And so I had it in my head for a while. I probably would have done a run had I not had this hip injury sideline me this year. But I really wanted to test myself in the arena, and I wanted to pull away the things I normally really relied on, which was like seeing a friendly face. It matters so much. It was wild how much it did matter and how much I really relied on them to get through some of these really long races. And so the prospect of taking that away from myself added a new mental element that I was super excited about, which is kind of what the whole thing behind why I did it.
And so without having those friendly faces and all that support, how did you find the difference between the ultras and this, where you were completely on your own for a lot of it?
I think it was brutal in a way that I didn't necessarily see coming. We talked a little bit about that pre-show, but so I had 4 or 5 of the days were under freezing temperatures, and there was like a headwind for most of the time. Actually, meant to Google. I don't know if wind only goes up the East Coast. I was riding my bike down the East Coast, and it felt like I think I could remember one morning where I had the wind at my back, and then the last day I had no wind. Other than that, it felt like wind in my face the whole time. And so there was a lot of times where it's like, you look left and right, it's like nobody's there, nobody cares. Like, I'd just be stopping in random gas stations where they were like basically didn't want me to be hanging out trying to get warm and stuff. And so it was like I had to like really go internal and find it within myself constantly to keep going and to keep myself motivated and to keep the fire stoked. And so it presented a challenge I was really excited about. And I've been doing a lot of mindset work myself lately. And so I'm always working through different ideas and concepts and things. And so I always require some kind of an arena to test them in. And so this bike ride was like it's the perfect arena, and it was just me versus me out there. It was great.
Absolutely. Well, and so the mindset training has been something that kind of since I've met you, that's what I've known about you is more that aspect of things.
Totally.
Be it, the special forces experience, which was a test of a mindset in a lot of ways, where we met, and then coming into the Clarity Academy and everything else you do. What do you do for yourself to keep that mindset up?
Oh man, I do a lot. I mean, I hit a point in my own life where I realized like there's, this is one of the things I say a lot, but there's not a finish line or a PR or an achievement or an amount of money in the world that's going to matter if you get there and your head is a mess. And so I was at the point where I was just doing and doing and constantly doing. And I didn't know how to be. I didn't know how to just sit with silence and just be myself. And so now that's what's caused a huge shift in my, because my podcast even started out, it was just about physical performance. That's what got me into the world, what I was excited about. And my own evolution has just brought me into the mindset space quite a bit. And so for me, it's looking like I try to face all of the things that I don't want to face. And so if I catch myself trying not to do something, it's the thing that I know that I need to face. And so there's a good quote by Carl Jung. It's like the answers that you want the most are going to be found where you're least willing to look. And I try to like really keep that close to my heart. And so for me, it's like, oh, you have trouble sitting still. It's like, okay, then you need to meditate, right? It's like, I really push myself and I put myself in these. So for me, what that looks like, this practice to me, it looks like whatever comes up for me that I notice, I try to sit with and I try to face. And I really do attribute that to almost all of my growth.
I think that's a great way to look at it. It's also kind of reminds me of the Brian Tracy eat the frog theory, where if you start your day by doing the thing you want to do the least, eating the frog, then
Totally.
everything else gets, that much easier in life. So meditating for you is big. Have there been things that you found more challenging to face than others, or has it been kind of uniformly challenging to face what's undesirable to face?
You mean as far as mentally or?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know because I don't want to face the thing. So it's like
that's
I just
fair. It's
always
just kind of
never want to
always
face them.
feels like that.
It kind of does, it kind of does. And I'm pretty brutal about it. Like I really don't let myself go too long. Like here's what happens. I think a lot of times in life is we say we have some kind of fear. Like I think an easy one to talk about is a fear of rejection because a lot of people have it. Well, what happens is that in the course of your life, you're actually going to be rejected very, very few times in life, right? Like you're not rejected a lot in life, but the fear of rejection will cause you from going into all of the circumstances in which you might be. And so what you see is your life actually becomes a smaller expression of it would be as it could be, because you're making all of these decisions to avoid opportunities where maybe rejection would come up for you. And so what you see is like your life ends up just being a smaller version of what it could be because you're getting boxed in by your own fears and the things that you don't want to face. One of the things that I did last year was I started doing a lot of stand-up comedy because it scared the shit out of me. And because I really want to be a good speaker, it's like there's nothing more scary than standing on stage to me and having people be like, make me laugh. It's like, oh God. Right. And I bombed too. I bombed one time really hard. And I remember like I go down and I sat there next to my buddy and I was like, man, uh, I'm not like whatever fear I had about going on stage is definitely gone because that was awful. And it's like not going to be that worse. It's not going to be that bad again for sure. So that's a really good one for me. It's like as a speaker, I still have the same fears of public speaking as everybody else. But again, I'm not going to deal with it or I'm not going to let it control my life if I want a certain thing for my life. Same thing in the military. I have a really deep fear of heights, like truly fear of heights. But, as special operations in the military, it's like, I've jumped out of hundreds of helicopters, hundreds of airplanes, right? Like hundreds of jumps, rappelling, fast roping, the whole deal. And it's because I prioritize the life that I want over the things that scare me, over the things that hold me back. And then it's like, okay, then if you decide that that's going to be the priority, then you got to just come up with the tools to help get you there, So like to control the heights one, for example, it's a lot of breath work. But it's like the tools are available, but you got to make the decision to step through it, step through the thing that's bothering you.
That's awesome. Honestly, I don't take this personally. I did not see you doing stand-up comedy. Not that I
Totally.
didn't think being funny wasn't in your wheelhouse, but just not what I kind of see for
Well, you
like
know what it
my
is?
image of you isn't that.
Right. And it's like that scared me a lot. And because it's not like if you told me like you could just look at me, I have like a bit of an imposing look, right? Especially the world that you saw me in. So it's like you would see me in a boxing ring for sure, right?
Yeah,
Like
no,
there are
exactly.
places you could imagine me. And I try to not to go to those. I try to go to the ones that you couldn't and just see what it's like and like own that, really like sit in it and live with it. And sometimes I go through times where I I just like everybody else, I like start living based on my fears. I start living smaller. I start avoiding things. And I like these really big events like the bike ride, for example, because it tears you so quickly out of your comfort zone. Like it's like it pulls the rug out from under you, and then it kind of recalibrates that. And it's like, okay. Like on that one, for example, I realized all these places this year where I was like, man, I kind of didn't go as big as I could have this year. And it's like, I need that. I need to be outside of that comfort zone to see what life's like and be like, it's not that scary. It's really not. It's the fear of the thing far more than it's ever the thing. And that I find that over and over. And that's for most people. It's like you have a fear of something, and that thing is holding you back far more than the actual thing itself, like rejection.
Absolutely. And I think you're dead on there. I think that is something that probably everybody in the world goes through. And then you're right. Once you dip the feet in the water, it's really not as bad as it could be.
Totally.
Now, you alluded to some breath work in terms of overcoming fear of heights. And like, I know at this point in your life, you have a lot of different tools to deal with probably just about any situation that comes up. Are there any tools that you find really like more helpful than others, or does everything kind of have its place in your life?
I honestly, for me, meditation is a big one. And I find that through different places. I find it through yoga. I actually will go do like guided meditations. That for me, most people are, what I find is most people are kind of like they're embedded in their thoughts. And so they don't have space from them. And one of the things that's interesting with with meditation is that you realize that you're the one aware of your thoughts. You're not the thoughts themselves. And so when you create that space, it allows you to pivot left or right in your life. But up until you do that, until you learn how to separate your thoughts from the awareness of your thoughts and you from the things you're going through, let's say, and your fears and all of these things, you can't direct your own life. And so I'd say for me, honestly, meditation's probably been the biggest thing to help create that mental space so that I can pivot where I want to pivot in life.
Okay. And I know actually often in the military, they kind of get you started with meditation, but any like tricks you had or tools you used to kind of get yourself into meditating at the beginning? Or is it something you just kind of pounded your way through?
Oh man, it was rough. It was very tough. For a long time, it was the thing, it's like the thing that is off in the distance, you should do, but you don't do, like yoga or something like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And honestly, the military was one place where it came up, like there was options if you wanted to meditate, but very few people in the community took advantage of it. And that's actually probably a bummer, because I think it could do a lot for people's mental health and just creating space between those thoughts. But parasympathetic breathing protocol has also been something that I've relied on just super heavily in my life.
Okay. Yeah, well, I find it really interesting because it's one thing that's come up a couple times in the podcast now, be it, like bodybuilders using it to get themselves through really tough times in prep, guys who have been in the military getting over, in your case, fears of heights, and a couple of other situations, more on like the business end of the world, just trying to control the stress that comes with trying to operate a business, which I'm sure actually applies to you a little bit at times too.
Totally.
And
are we talking about breath work?
Yeah, the breath work, the meditation, just everything
Yeah.
that kind of comes with that. And it's interesting how many kind of boundaries that crosses in terms of trying to help people with their physical performance, their mental, emotional,
Totally.
and kind of every end in between.
Yeah. And I mean, we're so sympathetic in our lives today. I think we're constantly on edge. Like our nervous systems are constantly run up. And it's like, man, your sympathetic nervous system was not developed so that you could, let's say, fight your boss and flee your office. Right.
Yeah.
But that's just what we use it for now. And so I feel like we're constantly dialed up. And so when I did learn to start creating that space for myself, it was just such a game changer. I really can't even describe it. It was great.
All right. And then, so on the topic of kind of being in a spot where you're fighting your boss and trying to flee your office, if you're up for it, I'm going to get you to talk a little bit about the Clarity Academy and kind of what that brings to the table in terms of people's performance in their day-to-day lives and the changes in the lives you see.
Totally. Yeah. I think in my life, I told you, like I was I'm a doer, right? It's like we talked a little bit pre-show about my time in the military. It's like I didn't have a lot of tools necessarily. I mean, performance tools perhaps, but mentally a bit of a mess. Like it was just push through everything, and that I can do, right? Like I know I have a grind mode, but what I kept finding is I'm like I would, I was like on the hedonic treadmill. And I think in Western culture, a lot of us tend to do that. It's like the hedonic adaptation essentially says that you're always going to fall back to your relative level of happiness, whatever that is, after you achieve whatever it is you achieve. And so most people think if I have this amount of money, or if I do this, I'm going to be happy. If I do this, that's actually not true at all. You actually just need to know yourself, right? Like most people just have no idea who they actually are. And you've seen the stat, it's something like 95 to 97% of what happens like within us is actually outside of our awareness. And so what I realized is like people are doing all of these things, and you wind up with a garage full of shit and you look around and you're like, I don't even know what I want. Like, I don't even know why I did this. And so I actually think the quickest route to high performance is authenticity. And so what I mean by that is if you could figure out what you actually wanted to do, right? And it actually aligned with your value system and your character and who you want to be in this world, well, then all of the discipline and motivation in the world, it doesn't matter, because you're going to wake up every day wanting to do that thing, or most days, right? And so what I find is we're trying to rely on discipline and motivation to tell us to get through all the things that we think we should do and the person we think we should be and all the expectations we have of what success looks like. And it's like, I think all of the habits and the tools and the tricks in the world would just fall short of you actually knowing who you really are and what you really want and going after it, right? It's like we always want the pill, we always want the diet, we always want the thing that's going to get us there. It's like, but it's like, just understand what you actually want, so you have a vision that pulls you. I think it was Steve Jobs who said that. He said something like, once you have the vision that pulls you, you no longer need the motivation or something. The problem is most people just don't have the vision that pulls them. They don't know what they want for themselves. And so me creating the Clarity Academy was me like gathering all of the tools that had worked in my own life to sort of develop this authenticity and then figure out who I really wanted, who I really wanted to be and what I really wanted for myself. So in it, we look at your value system and we look at your personality and we look at your characters and we try to parcel you apart based on all these different levels of analysis, so we can figure out, what do you even want for yourself? It's like most people, you give them a magic wand and you say like, okay, wave this and you could have whatever you want. They'd have no idea. They'd wave it and they'd be miserable in a week. They'd like land themselves on a beach in Tahiti. And it's like, you don't want that. You don't want that for maybe a week, but you don't want that. Like, what do you really want? How about you build the life you don't want to escape from? And so that was what pushed me to create the Clarity Academy in the first place.
I really like that concept of like creating the life you don't want to escape from, because you're right. I think there's that like and even in myself, in terms of kind of when I'm looking at what I kind of want, it's very easy to fall into, I would really love to be on that beach in Tahiti.
Totally.
For a week.
For a little bit.
And then I'll get bored, and I'll desperately want to be back in the office and working with people and doing what I really love. And luckily I'm in a spot where I think I'm pretty close to that. There's definitely some changes that can be made in my own life and working on implementing those myself. But I've hit a point where I absolutely love what I do. I get to see some really cool changes that I can make in other people's lives through a variety of tools. And I love it. Like, there's probably nowhere I'd rather be most days than the office, except in Ottawa. It gets really cold and snowy. You should come visit. And it would be nice to get some heat at some point, but that's, something I could escape from for a week and be happy to come back.
Totally. So, and I'll be honest with you. I do believe that the society that we've set up is just not working for people on a massive scale. But people don't have the answers yet. Like, they don't have the tools. They don't have the tools to cope with it. And I think you can see that, especially in Western culture. It's like, the depression rate, obesity rates, like suicide rate. It's like all of these things are climbing. And I'm actually pretty hopeful that, the pendulum's going to swing back as we realize like, this society that we've architected, we needed it for a while because we needed industry. We needed to create the fact that you and I can have a radio show and talk over a computer with no barrier to entry, basically, right? It's like we needed to like lift the economic tides for lots of people. But now we're at a point where it's like that life doesn't resonate with people. Like punching the clock just to punch the clock, it just doesn't resonate. And I think we're at this weird dichotomy right now where people are, they're they're sort of putting themselves in their lives. And then at the same time, because we know there's more for us out there, we're turning to things like performance. And I think what we're going to see is that there's going to be, I think now the next part of this is authenticity. I think we're like, it's like a lot of people they're trying the diet and they're trying the workout routine and they're trying the health hack, but they haven't yet tried believing in themselves. Right. Like, I think we're going to come back to that. I think that's where we're headed personally. We'll see.
Well, I think that's a huge, huge step. And I love that you've created the Clarity Academy for that. And I love, like I've ended up working with a couple people who you've been through that with. And, it seems like it's been a big, profound change for them. They get to know who they are a little bit better and are now trying to steer themselves down that path of that life that they don't want to have to escape.
Yeah. I think everyone deserves what we have, right? They at least a shot at it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I, there's so many tools out there. For you, if you don't mind, what would be kind of that first step you'd take with somebody in the Clarity Academy to help them kind of figure out, even step one of like, how do I start to figure out who I am?
So the step one of the Clarity Academy, there's a structure that like makes sense because it all builds on itself. But I would say, just for listeners that aren't going to take it or whatever, aren't interested in that, I would say to ask yourself a question. I would say that there's something that you should do that you're currently not doing. I would say, what is that thing? I would say, go do it. That's what I would say. You got to start engaging with reality in a way that's authentic to you. And, sometimes you find you start going down this road. This is one of the cases I was trying to make in my first book, is like, just figure out, do your bucket list. Like, just do the things you want to do in the world. And if you find out, like, a lot of people, like, maybe you want to start a business. Maybe that you have this idea, you feel like always your whole life wanted to start a business. Go start it. And if it sucks, then it won't be in your head as a loose end and a what if for the rest of your life. Right? If you don't like it. And so it's like almost just as valuable, to find the things you don't want as the things you do want. But instead, it's just there's a whole like vast world out there, but you have your own interests and thoughts. And like, you wonder about, man, I wonder if I could do this. I wonder if I could do that. It's like, hey, you probably could, you just got to go do it. And so I would say, whatever that thing is, whatever comes up for you, what's the thing that you need to do that you want to do that you're not doing? I would say face that. That's probably your first call to adventure. And if you're familiar with the call to adventure, the whole first part of it is that we typically ignore it for a while, so that's how that goes.
Well, and again, honestly, I think this is one of mine where I've been mulling over this idea of starting the podcast, and I have so many very interesting people in my life, yourself included, that it almost felt wasteful to not share with the people I was connected with. But I put it off for so long because I, find it awkward to record myself. And I find it, so it's been a really great experience so far though, too. And, back to what you'd said before, the fear of the thing is worse than the thing itself.
Always.
The fear of the podcast was that much worse than it has been sitting down and, like hitting you up and having a conversation. Mm-hmm. It's not uncomfortable at all. And I think that's a great sort of just example of exactly that. Like, do kind of what you don't want to, because I've had a great time with this. I wouldn't trade the experience, and I'm really glad I've done it.
Yeah. What I find is we'll do anything to not do the thing, right? Even if it's harder, it's like, but it's not the thing. And that, but you like, and for whatever reason, it seems like whatever the equation that the universe is set to me, it seems like we need these things, right? You need the wrong turns. You need to go do something that doesn't matter to realize it doesn't matter. You need to make all the money to realize it doesn't matter, right? You have to get to the finish line to be like, maybe there's something else. So I think it's all just a process, and you just learn along the way and figure it out. But I would say at some point you have to reach a point where it's like, you have to be super honest with yourself and start doing the thing that you're here to do. That, I think that's what a good life is made of. I think that's your call to adventure, really.
Absolutely. And actually, funny enough, normally I finish these podcasts off by asking what what purpose you connect to is. And I think we've done nothing but talk about that with you.
Yeah.
But if there's anything else you want to stay on that one, then you've got kind of an open mic. And otherwise, I feel like it's been really well said.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I think the thing that pushes me in this world is to set the people that I love free. And what I mean by that is I know that the cage isn't locked, right? And the cage that people think that they're in, all of the things they should do, the things they're expected to do, and the things they feel like they have to do, and the obligations and all of that. It's like the cage isn't locked, right? There's no reason why you can't pivot when you're 35 or 45 or 55 in life, except for you telling yourself a story about how you can't pivot. But there's nothing physical there. And I find that the thing that separates people that really dislike their life from people that have a lot of life satisfaction isn't ever anything in the world. It's between their ears. And so I would just tell you, like, that's the thing that I want to do with my life, is to just show people that the cage isn't actually locked. It's just your thinking that's keeping you where you're at. And so I would say if you're sitting there in life and you feel like you're stuck, if you feel like you're rut, I would say to start telling yourself something else, right? Tell yourself you're not stuck. Start figuring it out, because it's just, there's nothing actually there that's holding you back. I think you'll do all of this work in your life, and you'll listen to podcasts, and you'll read books, and you'll hire coaches, and you'll listen to mentors, and you'll go to conferences. And at the end of the day, what you're going to find is the thing that's in your way is you. I'll end there.
I think that's a beautiful way to end off. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today, Rick. It was great having you.
Yeah,
I always come out of these conversations feeling really empowered and awesome about things. So selfishly, this has been great for me too. Hopefully everybody listening finds the same. Check Rick out if you're listening. He's on Instagram at Rick Alexander, I believe. There's also the morning _ Rick Alexander _ There's the Morning Coffee podcast on pretty much every podcast platform I'm aware of, and check out the Clarity Academy if that sounds like it's up your alley. So thank you so much for listening.